Hello there. This is just going to be a straightforward monologue, and it's not going to be any graphics added to it. Not this time. So I want to talk about a subject that's sort of a very, very popular thing. Experienced in the fairy realm. There's a lot of books about that. Lots and lots and lots of books. And it's a thing that became popularized in the Victorian era. And then there was a particular set of photographs that were all over newspapers all over the world, which turned out to be staged. These little cutout fairies were put in the garden, and it looked very realistic. So that was hailed as proof of the existence of fairies. And well, ever since that time, there's been huge interest down generations. Peter Pan, Tinkerbell, all that kind of thing, into the more modern age. And certainly the last few decades, there's been lots and lots of books on fairies, and certainly the last decade or so there has. Now, some of these books are very interesting, are very good. Someone who I know a little bit personally would be author Morgan Daimler, who has written quite a lot of books on this subject, and she be coming particularly from a sort of academic background, very much sort of theory and research-based historical research, as opposed to sort of being based around practical experience. That's not to say she's never had any practical experience of them, but I'd say that's probably quite limited compared to maybe some people who have never written anything about it at all. And there's a lot of people writing about the subject, some of them who have literally only theoretical knowledge, and which is rather a strange thing. And there's all kinds of products you can buy in relation to fairies, everything from oracle cards and jewelry and picture books. You can buy so all kinds of trinkets and plastic resin figures, made in China usually, unfortunately. Now all of this stuff is okay. Maybe it's all right in itself, but it's all very consumer based. It's all like out making money and buying stuff, and consumerism, which is something that the fairy don't even understand what it is. They don't really even understand the concept of money, really. So it all seems a bit vaguely ridiculous to me, to be honest. If you're really interested in the fairy realm, why do you need to buy all this tit-tat and this paraphernalia? They have no interest in any of that. And I sort of wonder, is this commercialism actually really helpful in any way? But that's not the main subject I wanted to talk about. It was really about the experience of it. And I think one of the things a lot of people don't seem to understand is that the fairies and spirits of the land and gods, they inhabit the wild places of the world. They don't live in big urban centres, So I think a lot of people, they read books and they buy the statues and they think they're going to have some amazing fairy experience. But the reality is, I'd say 99% of the time, if you live in an urban centre, or you live in a housing estate where they ploughed up all the land and put down loads of concrete and then wedged all these houses in there, destroyed all the trees, took everything of nature out of it, the chances of a visit from the fairies are very low, especially low in big cities and urban centres. because they hate that. They absolutely hate that kind of thing. And I mean, it's not to say they can't come in your house. I've experienced that myself. You know, when you live in an old house in a sort of a country area where there's still wilderness, there's still woodland and sort of unspoiled areas, that is quite possible. I've experienced that. But as a general thing, generally, if you want to experience the fairies, you really want to go to them, really. And I might say, in a respectful manner. You don't just go marching into where they live, going, "Oi, hey, I want to have a chat, come here." Because that kind of attitude will get you nowhere. What people should realise is that they can remain totally hidden. They don't have to make themselves available to you, or appear to you, or communicate with you in any way. They can go about their business in a sort of different dimension, if you like, you know. So, you know, they can observe us without us being able to observe them. I'm just going to have a sip. It's nice. I'm coming from the cold outside, so I needed a nice cup of tea. So it's very much sort of up to them about any interactions. It's entirely at their behest that you get to communicate with them at all. Now, personally, I have had a lot of experiences with them, but my ability to communicate is somewhat limited, I have to admit. They tend to communicate with telepathy, and I have been able to receive messages from them that way, but I can't really seem to communicate with them in a telepathic sense. I speak to them in reply to anything, and as I said, my interactions with them have been quite limited. I have been to many places where I know that she lived, both on my own and with other people, and in some of those cases when I've gone with other people, you know, those people on occasion have had remarkable ability to communicate, actually be able to have a real conversation with them, done telepathically, and then report back what the conversation was to other people that were present. And I would say these were genuine. It wasn't fake. It wasn't hoodwinking. It wasn't some kind of trick. And that's only happened on a few occasions with a couple of people. I would say most people are not actually well enough tuned in to nature or emotionally on the right level to actually be able to interact with them. And they can sense what kind of person you are. So if you show up there with a bag full of plastic figurines and waving the incense around, dressed up in silly clothes and going, "Oh, hello fairies, please talk to me." If they don't have any kind of sense that you are connected with nature, that you are respectful, that you're the kind of being that they actually want to communicate with, then they're just not going to bother. So any amount of wishful thinking isn't going to actually help you at all. If you've got the wrong attitude, if you're just a noisy, bumbling, sort of foolish human, is what they usually see us as, that you'll get nowhere. They like calm, and they like respectfulness, and they like people with the right attitude towards them and towards nature in general. As a general rule, I'd say they don't like people. They like to stay away from humans. They see us as dangerous and idiotic in many cases. So, your expectations should be limited. And if you are able to have some interaction with them, then you're lucky. I consider myself very lucky to have had numerous interactions. But as I said, they have been kind of limited due to my limited skills in terms of telepathy or interaction or whatever communication skills. In that respect, are not as good as I might like. So yeah, limited to some extent. But to have any interaction at all, I think is, yeah, fantastic, and I consider myself very lucky. Now, there are people who we sitting at home in their apartment, in their house in the middle of New York or London or somewhere, and they think, oh, I'm just going to pray and meditate and call the fairies and they'll come to me. I would say the chances are probably 99.9% if you live in a big urban city. What's actually happening when you think you have an interaction with the fairies is it's just a visualization. It's just your imagination, probably. And you can try techniques given in books and whatever, people advise this and that. But, they hate to live in dirty, crowded, noisy urban environments. So the chances of them actually coming to visit you, and you live in the middle of New York, for instance, are like, they're really, really very tiny chance that anything's going to happen. And more than likely, it's just your imagination that's generated the experience. I'm sorry to say that, but that's just the truth of it. They do not live in horrible, polluted, urban shitholes. And they want to live in the wild places. And that's where they do live. And I mean, they've been marginalized. There's less and less wilderness for them to live in, so their numbers are sort of increased in these wild places because there is not much else for them to live in. Even sort of farmland sometimes has been sterilized, become like horrible monocultures with very little living there. And even that, a big field of corn is not the kind of place where they want to hang out either. The wild nature is the best place to find them, and probably, a long way from sort of built up human centers. So, I think so much surrounding the commercial end of dealing with fairies that gives people false impressions. I just felt compelled to actually say something about this because I think people are being very much misled by all this. And I know certainly children are desperate to meet the fairies, and I suppose children are more likely to see them, to be honest, or have an interaction with them because, they haven't been as heavily corrupted as adults. But the reality is, you're not going to find them anywhere. If you just go out into your average urban garden, lift up a rock, you're not going to find them there. They've seen what we've done to the world, and they're not impressed. They're not happy about it. And I think they're very distrustful of us in general. They do recognize when there's people who are really genuinely trying to make the world a better place. They have great telepathic and empathic abilities. So they can read us like a book, really. So they know what your intentions are when they see you. And, they then choose whether or not there's going to be an interaction. So, I mean, there's a lot of historical precedents being described and different accounts, etc. In one of my other videos, I've given some accounts of that, which I'm not going to go into here specifically. I'll put a link actually for one of those videos if you're interested. But I think people need to shift their expectations and be more realistic and understand that the fairies are not a commodity. They're not toys. They're not playthings. They're not something to be financialized and exploited. They are living beings that live in a sort of parallel dimension, I suppose, is what you'd call it, really. And I think just because we desire to see them or interact with them doesn't mean that we necessarily should. And I mean, I know places where they can be found, but I'd be very reluctant to just bring lots of people there because it would very much disturb them. And, you know, it isn't Disney. It's not a theme park. I think they wouldn't thank me or anybody else for like bringing truckloads of tourists or curious people through the areas where they do live. And that would only just make them want to retreat even further. So if you really, really are interested in them, I think you need to forget about all this commercial bollocks, because it is bollocks, and try and develop the appropriate attitude towards them and the appropriate respectfulness. And you know, if you go and you fail, so be it. You know, you can say you've tried, but it's best not to have too many expectations. Most of the times where I have interacted with them, it was actually unexpected. I've never really had huge expectations, and things have just happened. And I haven't, you know, I haven't been where I was with specifically with the purpose of trying to meet the fairies. And the same to be said with the spirits of the land, with the gods. Often, you know, your desperation, your desire to meet them actually means that you won't. It puts them off to a large extent. So I think it's best just to go and visit places in nature, you know, to enjoy the experience, and try and connect with the natural realm, but not be obsessed or overly absorbed the idea of, you know, interacting with beings from an alternate reality or another dimension or parallel dimension, if you like, because they live here on the earth, obviously, with us, but in a slightly different phase or frequency, if you like, and that's why we don't usually see them, because of that. So I think there's a lot that's gone wrong in terms of presentation and understanding and expectations with regard to the fairy realm, and I think that's very unfortunate. And I think if you really wanted to help them out in some way, if you feel that you know, some kind of calling to help them, what you could do is create wild spaces. If you have a patch of land or you have a big garden or whatever, they will gravitate towards that kind of thing. Patches of trees and wilderness, scrub, which is untamed and unmolested by humankind. So if you wanted to make yourself popular with them, that's probably the best thing you could actually do, is create a wilderness for them to live in or to visit. You know, leaving stupid trinkets and offerings of booze or whatever, that doesn't mean anything to them. It's of no purpose or use to them. They might appreciate the thought, but it is actually not beneficial in any way. But wild spaces is something that actually would really benefit them. So anyway, I think I've pretty much covered everything I wanted to say about that. So I would be, you know, inclined to suggest, you know, forget about all these sort of modern takes on the fairies and all the commercial crap that's being kicked around in regard to them, and be prepared to, like, you know, reassess your view of them from the ground up. And I think once you've actually experienced them in real life, when you've actually met them, it does change you, and it will change your perception and how you feel about them, and perhaps you'll have a completely different understanding of what they actually are and what they do and why they're here. And they're not here to serve us, that's for sure. And I think we could do a lot more to have a better understanding of them and we have way too much of an anthropomorphic or humanized view of these beings, which is probably why we don't understand them and why we have difficulty in interacting with them, because of that, very, very human view of what they are or what they should be, in our opinion. So anyway, I think that'll do. That'll do for now. Drop a comment if you like what I had to say. 20 minutes. This was only meant to be a short one, but there you go. All right, that's it. That's all for now. Thanks for watching. And please give a thumbs up if you liked what I had to say.